Sorry, we are on the wrong one, everybody.
Still waiting.
Here we go.
Welcome to the Thursday Checkdown. I'm your host, Greg Kellogg. Tip will be joining us later, but in his stead, we've got IDP Iggy. Iggy Gilbert, how you doing tonight, Iggy?
Great, Greg. Always a pleasure to be here with you. Just ready to talk some sports and learn and just from this episode, man, we get so much knowledge and it's just a lot of fun to be a part of.
That's very kind. Hey, I want to say out front, because I rarely say this, I always forget. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you drop a comment, I'll try to look at it and answer. But if you comment in the chat now, we'll see it and we'll answer right on the show as it is. Tonight's we have a special guest. This is a man that I worked with back in 2000 through 2001 at foxsports.com. After Fox Sports ended for the fantasy team, the entire team was let go. His story takes a whole turn that mine did not. So let us welcome Glenn Rabney from everywhere now. We'll let him get into that. Glenn, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Good to be here. And just for those who are watching this because it's sports, you need to know I probably know less about sports in general than everybody who's watching this now, and especially you guys.
But you ran the fantasy baseball for Fox Sports for that year.
Yes, exactly. Well, Mike actually ran it, but yeah, even then I didn't know what I was doing. Plus, I just remember then I hadn't done fantasy football. You guys made me do a fantasy football team. I'd never done that before, and I was doing that live for basically a few million people who were watching it every week.
Yeah, fantasy football was my baby. I loved it. And then after they decided that they didn't need us anymore, they had me do fantasy NASCAR. Now, NASCAR was fun because the crews are amazing to work with. If you ever have to do a fantasy sport, those NASCAR crew chiefs and drivers, they'll talk to you like regular people. They're not like superstars, and they are superstars. Yeah. But anyway,
it's fun. I'll just let you know, I just started this week for the first time. A friend invited me to join his F1 fantasy league. 12 teams, and the first week I came in 5th. So.
Oh, there you go.
It's one week.
Is it 5th out of 5th?
What?
Was it 5th out of 5th?
5th out of 12th. So
there we go.
Well, that's top half.
And it's all based on Drive to Survive.
Okay.
All right. So, Glenn, you mentioned Mike, and you're talking about Mike Perlow, obviously.
Yeah.
Mike put together the whole team. I never did learn how he knew everybody, and I don't remember the whole team. I remember Mark Bond, yourself, myself, and Mike. Was there Adam Slotnick?
Adam Slotnick.
Okay. Was there anybody else?
No, actually, not there, but across Bill Ladson, who is one of the writers for the Washington Nationals, MLB.com, who I occasionally see. He was on the other side, so he would occasionally write stuff with me on if there's a baseball stuff. And we used to do the updates.
So when Glenn says the other side, he's talking about the hard sports coverage side. Yes. Clark Judge was the head football writer at the time.
Yes. So, and when we get further into this, I'll tell you the story behind it, how we all got fired.
Well, please enlighten us now, because I never knew how.
Well, part of it was that the internet was new, and Rupert Murdoch put all this together he was going to do TV shows and sports and news and put everything together as an internet. And Rupert decided that the internet was a passing fad. And he decided he didn't want to spend the money to compete with ESPN. So he said, we're going to just go clip speak. And the way I knew he didn't understand it is on the TV side, they had shows on a webcast for all the shows, and he canceled all the ones except for the sci-fi one, which was the biggest rating. And it's like, no, you keep the other ones because you're driving people to with the popular show, and then they'll see the other ones. And he canceled everything else except for the show that already had big ratings. So he didn't understand it all. And if you remember, there was I guess it was 21 or whenever, we had a meeting. They called us in January and said, well, we're going to change it. We're going to go just to clips. And when they did that, they said, but you guys are going to work through the end of March. We'll pay you. You'll continue through the end of March. But then it's being canceled. And I wrote columns, and we'll go into later. I didn't really write sports. I'm a comedy writer. So I wrote things basically expressing opinions. I always wanted, the nice thing is I wanted a joke in there. And I started writing columns every week that said, and these were being read by millions of people, talking about how management had no understanding about the value of their players. And I continue saying this, and they're destroying the sport, that they don't understand, and we need to get out of this business. And I got called into one of the head guy's office, and he said, I see what you're doing. You can't do that. You have to stop writing that. And I said to him, or what? You're going to fire me? Oh, that's right. You already have. And then the next week they came in, they told everybody, we're going to pay you to the end of March, but you're finished now. So that's why you got those 2 months of work pay.
Basically, they paid us 3 months where they didn't expect content.
Right.
And
that's why they just told us to go home. You're welcome.
Yeah, actually, I think
You're welcome.
we stopped writing in March, but we were paid through June or something like that.
I think it was February and April. It was something like that. Okay. But I just remembered that once I had that conversation with them, the next week they came in and said, yeah, we don't need you guys' writings anymore. We'll just put up in.
It was silly. I always thought it was a jealousy thing because they told us when we first got there, I said, do you want to monetize, or are you worried about hits, clicks, and stickiness? And they said, we want the page views and the stickiness. We don't care about the money. And I said, okay, we can do that. That's easy enough. We can monetize it. But we were out performing the hard sports guys.
Yeah.
We were getting more page views, and they were much stickier because a fantasy guy will read an article 3 times, start to finish, to make sure they understand everything. So we were naturally set up to beat those guys. And I always figured they were just jealous because we were outdoing them.
No, it was money in that ESPN had already had a fantasy department, and they were doing better. And Rupert thought in order to compete with that, they'd have to spend so much money and build it up to compete with ESPN. So he thought it was cheaper, we have all these clips, we'll do highlights, they have a couple writers on it, and they won't bother with fantasy, because after all, what future is there in fantasy sports?
Well, Rupert, I think, has learned that he was wrong at this point.
Yes.
So tell the story. You already told me, but tell the story about we're let go. Okay, I lived out in the Antelope Valley. Edwards Air Force Base is out there. Before I went to Fox, I was doing defense contracting because I had a top secret clearance. So my clearance was still active because it had been less than a year. I just took a job defense contracting out in the Antelope Valley working at Edwards Air Force Base. What did you do?
I went back to what I originally did. I'm a television comedy writer. I had done stand-up and improv. I'd worked on a number of shows. And I just went to writing with my partner. We were writing movies and pitching and basically a working writer. And interesting, at one point, and I got this, actually on the last day, the best job I've ever had, on the last day at Fox, as we're walking out, and I'm blanking on his name now, the guy who created the Dodger website. He had been hired by MLB to create a website for all the teams, and he was going to overrun it. So as we're going out, he says, "What are you going to be doing now?" I said, "I don't know, just go back to writing." And he said to me, he goes, "Do you want to be a stringer for MLB.com?" And I said, "Sure." what does a stringer do? And he said, oh, you'll fill in if we don't have a writer or the teams coming in don't have a writer. You'll go to the stadium and you'll play sports writer. So up into from then 21 into basically the pandemic, every year I would play sports writer about 20 times a year. I'd go out to the stadium and I'd get there early. I'd hang out in the locker room. I'd have the interviews in the dugout. I'd be on the field during it. After the game, I'd have to write my column. You saw something in the game and you go, why did the manager do that? I would go down to the dugout and locker room and said, why did you do that? And he'd answer me. And so it was absolutely, and at the end of the day, I had to write some articles, and at the end of the day, they paid me. And I'm going, oh my God, this is the greatest job ever. I get now the friends hate it because they always say, hey, you want to go out to a baseball game? And I go, buy a ticket and sit in the seats. I spent 20 years in the locker room. I really don't want to be doing that. But though I will tell you, very bad on fantasy, because what it does is you start getting friends, you start meeting people, you start talking to players, and you do things that you would not do if you didn't have this inside information. And inside information is always wrong. I had a player.
Not always.
Oh, I had a player who during the game got hit, and I had him on my team also. And he showed me his hand, and it's completely swollen, and his fingers bent out to the side, and he can't move it. And he goes, "Look at this." I said, "This is gonna." And I said, "Okay." So I put him down because he missed one day and had a huge week on my bench. I also probably one of the few people who've been told by a player. Remember Scooter Jeanette?
Yeah, unlike football, though, football's week to week.
Oh yeah.
If guy's injured, he's not playing that next week, so you can put him down. Baseball, you got to do a whole week's worth of stats for one game.
Right, and you ask people. So Scooter Jeanette was a second baseman for the Reds, and I had him, and he was scuffling, and I wasn't. So I put him down. When I put him down, he has a week in which he hits 5 home runs and 18 RBI. Has a monster week. I put him up again. Horrible week. 2 weeks horrible. I put him down, and he has a game where he hits 3 home runs. He hits, I think it's 9 home runs during the week. Unbelievable. I happen to be covering Cincinnati the next week. And I see him, and I go up to him and goes, I have a bone to pick with you. And he did. And he looked at me, and he just said, you are never, ever allowed to play me on your fantasy team, ever.
It'd be your turn, buddy.
Glenn, I just want to say thanks, man. I played only one season of baseball. I'm really deep into basketball right now. But I want to ask, man, I took a comedy class to learn to write. I enjoy writing. I've wrote multiple theses and more of an academic focus, but writing comedy was so difficult. And, it makes you appreciate, even Shakespeare and Eddie Murphy and just anybody, George Carlin, any of these people that have wrote comedy, because it either has to be the observation of your society and it has to be like in that moment, or it has to be genuinely funny, and if like Jimmy Buffett said, if we couldn't laugh, we would all go insane, right? So just what insights do you have on being a writer, and did you ever feel stress as a television writer to write comedy specifically?
No, and people would say this a lot. Oh, that's got to be the hardest. That and stand up. They go, that has to be the hardest job ever. And my answer, and they always thought it was a joke, but it's completely serious. It goes, if it was difficult, I wouldn't be doing it. And for me, comedy, especially just stand up or just writing things or coming up with jokes, it's like a party trick. And my wife always gets annoyed because we'll party. People come over and they talk to me. People, bosses and stuff like that, for about 10 minutes, and then they leave. And she goes, stop trying to entertain them. I said, I'm not. It's like I'm a juggler or do balloon animals. I sit there, they find it's fascinating for 10 minutes, they laugh, they have a great time, and they leave. But it's something I'm unable to. I've now learned around the house and stuff like that, when anything's going on, that I've learned to take that half a beat moment before I say something, because my sense of humor, it's dark, it's sarcastic, it's cynical, and there are a lot of people who don't get that. So it's like, I won't do that at home. My daughters just look at me and just they roll their eyes. It's like, whatever.
Yeah, that's a
But
damn thing.
it's fun. It's everybody does what they do well. And it was actually, this is nothing I hadn't thought about being a writer until I accidentally fell into it, and then found out, oh, I can do this really good.
Well, since you are a writer, a professional writer, and since you've written for what's got to be the greatest show ever, the Mickey Mouse Club.
The
I
new
mean,
Mickey Mouse Club.
Yeah.
okay.
I'm not that old.
Now, and you mentioned before the show in the green room the stars that are on that.
Oh, yeah.
Timberlake and
Britney
singer
Spears.
Britney. Yeah.
Justin
Did you
Timberlake
ever
and
get
Britney and Kerry Russell. And
Did you ever get a chance to meet them?
oh, all the time. I mean, I was on the set. We were writing. They come to the office. This one of my wife always says one of my favorite things is one of the people. The first when I got there is they're showing clips of the new people who come in that show, and Kerry Russell, who was about 15 at that time, and she just came in and we were watching the clips and goes, oh my God, she's amazing and she's gorgeous and beautiful. And so the joke is that she's my weekend pass. But she used to come in the office and we'd be sitting there. She'd ask us something about how the line was going, what it was doing. And all of a sudden the tram would pass by my office, and we would at Orlando at the Disney MGM at that point. It was there because they wanted to have something for the tram and to watch. And the tram would pass by every 3.5 minutes. And
Oh my God.
this was 92. And as the tram passed my office, it was, and on the left of the office is a new Mickey Mouse Club. On the right is a giant asparagus from Honey I Spoke every 3.5 minutes. And you watch the people come by, and she and another kid would be there. And all of a sudden the tram would come and they go, quick. And they would jump in my lap. And we're like, I think nowadays so inappropriate, but it's like, hi, waving.
Every
So,
3.5 minutes. That's almost like a weird torture, you know?
Oh,
That's it's like a 1960s hit song.
Right.
3.5 minutes.
And I had a card in my window because I didn't technically work for Disney. I worked for the company that was producing it. And I had a card in my little sign in my window that I wrote that said, I am not a Mouseketeer, I'm a human being.
Treat me as such.
What was your favorite writing job?
Oh, not necessarily the news. Absolutely on HBO. Just it was the first
pure comedy.
It was the first job I ever had, and it's you were sitting there and you'd go in and you'd watch videotape and something like that, and it's like your job was, okay, let me watch this. How am I going to make fun of the president of the United States today? Okay, I'll do that. And you write it, and it goes out on the air, and people are watching this, and you make fun. I showed my daughters hadn't seen it. My daughters are now 25 and 26, but they hadn't seen any of the stuff I had done. So I showed them finally a reel of what this is stuff from 89 and 90, and they're looking at it, and I'm doing jokes about the drought in California, the war in the Middle East, and Donald Trump. And they're going, when did you do this? And I said, that was the thing, we've been doing those jokes forever. It's the same thing. It's as they say, the long arc of history is actually a full circle.
Right.
So,
yeah, exactly.
But it was just the greatest job. And just so people know, when you watch those shows and like the Daily and show stuff like that, people go, oh, everybody has an agenda. You have your own personal feelings on politics and stuff like that, but what comes first is what's the joke, and you write jokes based on what's funny. So there were things that I put on the air that I didn't believe in, but it was just a great joke.
Yep. No, you gotta have that.
And that's
right?
when you watch these guys. It's like, it's because certain things are easy to make jokes and stuff like that. It's always easier to. And it's always better to punch up rather than punch down. So
better too, but a lot of today's writers punch down.
Well, you get a point of view, but most of the good ones punch up. The bad ones there's this kind of like, and I'm not going to names, it's kind of like they just, they're angry. And you have to have the bottom at the end of the day for a joke to work. It has to reach an audience of people who don't know and don't care. It's just the premise is funny. You can't make a living preaching to the people who only want to hear that particular stuff.
That makes sense. I mean, how did you fall into writing? You said you fell into it. How did that come about? I mean, HBO being your first job.
No, it's weird. I grew up in Long Island where comedy and writing wasn't a thing that I didn't know was a job. No advisor back then is going to tell your parents your son should go into writing comedy.
Yeah.
So I didn't do it, and I went to Penn State, got a degree in economics, which later when I was doing stand up, it allowed me to sit my favorite job because I have a degree in economics, hasn't enabled me to get a job, but I better understand why I can't afford to buy anything.
Which is even
So
more damning in some
I
ways.
came out, I did some business stuff, and I had a government project that was for a year on HMOs and stuff. And I finished it and I handed in the reports and they said, thank you. And I'm going, wow, that was so unfulfilling. At the same time, I had a friend, we were writing music and writing songs and playing in wine and cheese. And when you do that, people clap. And I would start doing longer intros and outros because I started hating the sound of my voice singing. And they did that. And I went out to California. I said, I got to do this. I need that kind of back. I went out to California to get a job in music. And I realized that I just couldn't do that because I hated performing in public. So I started working in a recording studio, learning how to do that. And someone kept saying, you need to do comedy. You need to do comedy. So they set me up with this woman who taught a class, and she also had a group. And part of the class was Robin Williams and John Ritter and Jim Belushi.
Worked with those guys?
Yeah. So the class wasn't, the first time I went into the class, I said, I'm just watching. She said, no, you don't watch. Everybody plays. And she looks over and she goes, okay, your turn. Come up stage. And she pulls up this person, Ken Levine, who I didn't know was the head writer of Cheers at that time.
Oh, wow.
And she goes, you guys are the same height, do work together. And they set everything up and he said something, I responded and the room laughed. And I go, oh, that's cool.
This is easy.
And then I said, and to continue all that, and at the end of the thing, she said, yeah, you need to be in this class. Most improv classes are actors. This was 80% writers. A number of them went on to run shows. And that's what Williams and Ritter, they used to come in to play with us because we were horrible actors. We were just damn funny. So, and I got from that, I went into stand-up. And from stand-up, I got people saw my act and said, oh, you should be writing for not necessarily the news. You do a lot of commentary, you do a lot of political and current events. So I got there, and then I just kept moving.
So how did you meet Mike Perlow?
But here's the whole background. So we should really talk about why I'm even here to begin with you talking sports. 1989, a friend of mine, I'm working at Paramount, and a friend of mine says, I'm starting a fantasy baseball league. Do you want to join? And I said, yes. What's a fantasy baseball league? And he explained. And he said, okay. And it was the first time there were 5 of us. We had no idea. I had the first pick. And just in 1989, that first pick in this league, which is still going now 35 years later, was Pete Incaviglia, was the first name thrown out for those Texas fans.
Yeah, the Rangers, Pete Incaviglia.
Right,
yeah, I remember.
Right. And you couldn't get a download. There was no online stuff. He built a program on his Commodore 128 to process the data he can get once a week that he could download. So you make your moves. You have no idea. Once a week, he would actually send it to me. I would go into the Paramount and I'd print it up and send it out on their money to everybody so everybody could get it in the mail 2 days later. And I did that. So I was doing that, and I took over, and then I took over, and it started how a new program, a new company that's better that I could access the data. And they decided, oh, we want to try and be more. This is in the early 90s. And they said, they put a thing, anybody who wants to write, will give you $25 if you write fantasy baseball stuff. And I said, sure. I sent in and I go, yeah, I'll write, but I'm not writing about baseball. I'm not going to cover a team. And they go, what do you write? And I showed them my credits that I worked for television, stuff like that. And they go, oh, okay. So I would write stories about touching baseball. I mean, I always said, and I've always said that if you're married and you win your league, do not buy an expensive gift. Buy something for your wife. Give that to her. Let her buy a purse. Buy a TV that she wants or something. So when she's complaining, you're watching baseball all the time, you could point. I bought a 35-inch Sony at that time, and I could point to it. Goes, that's what they're winning. So I was doing that. They then got bought by USA Today. Still got the $25, but now it's being on usatoday.com. Then usatoday.com became more of a sports. I got me my baseball tickets, passes, so I could go in because I was writing. So I was on that. And then one day I get this email from Fox. It goes, hi, we're putting together a fantasy team. We've been reading your articles. Do you want to be in it? And I go, okay, why not? It's a steady job, which is not something I was used to having. So that's how they just saw me doing that. It was just this kind of weird progression. And then I met Mike, and he liked everything writing. And I don't think he realized at that point that, as you saw, you know well, Greg, I wrote with this, what I wanted to do, get laughs. I wanted to get off. I wasn't really giving the best analysis.
You're Matt Berry. You're basically Matthew Berry.
Yeah.
Matthew Berry is a great fantasy guy, but he's mainly a comedian.
Yeah.
And he writes
he
comedy.
Used to write on television. He used to be a TV writer, sitcom writer. Yeah.
And,
so that's how
he's in the Hall of Fame, by the way. He's in the Fantasy Sports Writers Hall of Fame because people loved his read, loved to read what he did.
I read him every week during the season. So that's how, I mean, and I looked at it as I had a lot of readers, a lot of people followed. And I thought, okay, that brings people in. That's my job. You guys can give the analysis of who to pick up and stuff like that. Mine was always just, people would say, should I carry? And I always had the same thing when people would always go, I had the advice column, and they go, should I trade this guy for that guy? And the answer was, I don't know. It depends on your league. It depends I can give that if 100 people can say, should I make this trade for that trade? And 100 people have different parameters. And why are you asking somebody who has no clue to what your league is?
That was what our job was. That was our job. Right. By the way, Tip has just joined us. He's here sans
Hello,
video.
Tip.
But Tip, do you have a question for Glenn? Is Tip there?
You may have it. Looks like you're still muted yourself there.
Yes,
Tip.
he's muted.
No,
yeah, there.
I'm here. How are you guys?
Hi,
I'm so sorry. We got out late again. Hey, Glenn. Hey, Greg.
Hi.
Hey, Iggy.
Hey, Tip.
Hey there.
Awesome, man. Yeah, no, I don't have a question. I was just listening in. I was listening to what you guys were talking about, fantasy baseball. I do have some baseball questions for you, Glenn, but keep hitting it, man.
Guy.
You were cooking. You were cooking.
I got to tell it. I have a league. My league now is 35 years. There's 18 teams in it, and I'm the commissioner, so they have to make their moves to me. And even then, they'll call me and they say, "I want to pick up Ramirez," and I was like, "Give me a position." They assume that since I'm doing this and since I work for MLB, that I know all the players, and the answer is I know nobody.
It's a great bluff.
I'm doing this for fun. It's fun, and it's become a community. So the 18 of us, the best day of the year, they all come in. We have about 6 people flying from other parts of the country, and I have 18 people in my living room spending a day drafting players.
I love it. I love it. Is it an NAL league, or is it NL only, or
NAL all league, and we draft from the entire world. It's a matter of fact, and show you how long with this is going on. In I think it was '94, I drafted a 16-year-old kid from Curacao called Andrew Jones, and last year I drafted his son. It's like I had to, but at the same time,
speaking of son, you got kids. Do they play?
No. They took up my older daughter played Little League for about 2 seasons, but I think she did it just because she knew I would like it. But at that point, and even then, it's like, one of the coaches, when they had the first get together, and was telling to people, "Do not yell, do not get." He said, "You have to remember, this is Encino Little League. You have a better chance of one day buying a team than being on a team." And truthfully enough, one of the managers, his grandfather is Lerner, who did buy a team.
Yeah, he's got one. We'll cover that base. I mean,
So,
what is your favorite and least favorite kind of story or memory about being a commissioner, and how long have you been? Is it a rotating position, or have you been a
no,
commissioner for a
I've
long
had
time?
it for years. My favorite is about 5 years ago. I had quadruple bypass surgery,
Oh,
and I was out of commission for about 2 weeks. It was during the season, and
2 weeks after
the people in the
quadruple.
league took over to take care of it for me, and they started making moves for my team that they thought, well, he would have made this move, and they sat a pitcher who, when he was down and I was unconscious, pitched a no-hitter. And when I got back, the first thing I said, no, I'm returning that. I'm not losing a no-hitter because you thought he'd be better.
So you put the point total back off of there?
Oh, I put it back in. I didn't want it happening. It's like,
oh, man, hey, that's honest. I don't know if it gets more
The
honest.
power of the commissioner is
exactly.
almost godlike.
Well, the one thing I tell people is, and I've had it in other leagues and stuff like that, the number one rule of any fantasy sports, is don't piss off the commissioner. He needs to be your best friend, because the commissioner, if you piss him off, he can do, like on an auction draft, oh, he's a little bit faster on you and slower on that guy. There's all these little things that happen. It's like, no, you don't want to have him angry at you.
Well, it's funny you say that, Glenn, because I'm actually in a couple of leagues where the commissioner actually can veto or approve a trade. So not the players in the league.
We have a panel.
It's crazy. It's like, you do have to kind of, so like every so often I'll be like, hey, do you want lunch? I can send you lunch, or, something like that, because it's like, you do want them to be your best friend. You're right about that.
Yeah, we have a panel. So if anybody complains, but as I tell people, I rule the league as a benign dictatorship. Everybody's handful, but at the end of the day, by the way, I will tell you one other great story. Back in about 15 years ago, I was trying to make a trade with a player, with another guy, and someone he wanted for stolen bases, but he wasn't stealing. It was like mid-season, and the guy who was supposed to steal 40 had about 8. And it so happened, and I can't remember who it was, but it so happened that I was covering him that week. So I went into the locker room and I started talking to him. He goes, so what's the deal with stealing bases? I wanted him to say, I'm planning on the second half of running a lot more. And I finally got him, and I put that quote in my column for MLB.com, which the other owner read and made the trade with me.
I'm telling you, when you say don't piss off the commissioner, it's even worse if it's somebody like Glenn, who can write something on a TV sitcom that refers back to you, and you know it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, we always use, and on TV and movies, we always use our friends' names. So,
hey, Glenn,
speaking of which, you wrote a movie that was picked up.
What?
You wrote a movie that was picked up, that was actually made.
Well, it was a Hallmark movie that came out.
It's still a movie.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which what I understand is it's called Love and Sunshine, and from what I understand, it's the highest rated non-Christmas movie they've done in the last 10 years. Now, I will say, and I've written 4 for them. I will say I have only watched one Hallmark movie, a rom-com, in my entire life, and that was the one I wrote, and I wasn't even thrilled with that. It's not anything I read. It's not what I like, but
did the actors bring forth your vision?
Yes. Oh, it was great, and I'm friends now with the director and the producer, and we're looking for other things to do. But it was great. I mean, it was fun. The one thing, it involved a dog, and there was a military guy with a dog that was coming back and adopting his long thing. But in my mind, I pictured the military dog as a German Shepherd. And that was and on Hallmark, you don't get to go to the set. You don't meet. They don't even talk to you. And the director sent me the first cut after the film, and the dog comes in, and it's this gorgeous, big, huge golden retriever. And I'd had a golden retriever who, by the way, was a movie star who had been in Snow Buddies. His grandfather was actually Air Bud.
Oh, wow.
And he looked exactly, and he had passed away about 6 months before. And I'm sitting there, and as soon as this came on, I go, oh my God, and it was like the spinning image. So the director goes, well, what did you think about it? He goes, I couldn't watch it. I had to think it's he goes, you had my dog. And they apologized. Matter of fact, they sent me the collar from the dog and stuff like now, but it was like so uncomfortable to watch this stuff. And I still can't watch it.
You're a comedy writer, man. You're a comedy writer. Make the military dog a toy poodle.
Yeah.
Or a chihuahua. Yeah, there you go.
I have no say on that. There are certain things on Hallmark, you do it and they go, yeah, no. Okay. Yeah. You're paying me, I do whatever you want.
That's funny.
Were you the only screenwriter for that film, or was it
No, it's my partner. I have a partner I write with. We do that. We've had a number of things out there now. We have a limited series. We have a graphic novel coming out.
Give his name. Put his name out, Glenn.
Bart Baker. And he's written a lot more stuff than I have. We have a graphic novel coming out this summer, so we're excited about first. So we're excited about that. I'm currently working with the artist.
What genre?
Sword and Sandals.
Nice.
Okay.
It's based on the true story of the Sacred Band of Thebes, who in 400 BC were the greatest army on the face of. They defeated the 300.
Oh wow.
Okay.
So,
did you have something you wanted to ask, Glenn?
Okay. Yeah, I did. Going back to fantasy baseball, or writing your articles, Glenn, what were some of your favorite articles that you wrote during those times?
God, I don't know. I mean, I don't really. I don't really dwell, and it's interesting between Fox and then MLB. Because of what they do at Fox, I used to hand in, and we'd hand things and they get edited. And I used to get back, and I used to get into fights because they would say, "Oh, we're changing this, we're changing that," and I said, "Why?" And they go, "Well, that's not AP style." And I said, "I'm writing." I said, "Writing is music. It's got a beat. I pick words because of the sound. There's certain things you do." And she said, "Well, like here." And at the last time I spoke to them, she said. The woman said, "Yeah, but here you started this paragraph. You started this sentence with the word 'but.' You can't start a sentence with the word 'but.'" And I said, "But I can." And that was the last time I spoke. I would just send things in, and they would do whatever. When I wrote for MLB, and I'm coming from a comedy background. I love callbacks. I would start every article, whatever the story was about the game, and it was about the game. I wasn't doing fantasy, just about the game. I would get something that was interesting, that was important. I would then start the story with it. I'd go through the whole column, and at the end, the last line would be a callback to the first line where it all came wrapped around. And I started looking at my thing online after they published it, and it's like, where's the last paragraph? Where's the great joke? And I called them and I said, "Oh, AP style, you mentioned that in the first paragraph, you don't mention it again." So I stopped. So basically the stuff at Fox and the stuff at I've never read the stuff outside of a couple of things. I've never read it once it goes on because I know I'd have to kill somebody.
I agree. I grew up with the fan of Tolkien, and some people will be like, "Why did he put commas? He puts unnecessary commas." I'm like, "No, he's not. He's wanting you to slow down so you read it in the pace he's wanting to deliver it at." And it's like today I did the same thing for my article over at Fantasy Alarm. I brought law of averages. and I tied everything back to law of averages. Every bet I wrote about kind of
Yeah.
had that theme about it. But luckily, I don't get edited like that. I'm the same way. I like no, that's what I'm trying to say. So I understand that completely.
Right.
And how do you retain that, or do you just have to let it go if you have to go through an editorial process?
If they're paying me, it's their choice. And if they're not paying, until they give me a check, until the check clears,
Unless
it's
they've
what I
already
want.
fired you. Unless they've already fired you. In which case,
They can do whatever. They're going to do whatever they want. You in this business, you're always going to be rewritten. People are always going to bring in. They're always going to do whatever. So you just kind of can't get that emotionally attached to it. But you're right about the comments. I'm horrible at grammar. I don't believe in grammar, but I use commas and punctuation in terms of how it sounds.
Yeah.
And writing, like I said, writing is music. Good writing, it has a beat, it has a rhythm. When you're reading it, there's and there's certain words that I just like. One of the things that called trademark, when if anybody tries to steal a script, which no one does, is every single one of my scripts has the word cornucopia in it somewhere. Maybe not said out loud, but just in direction, because I just love the word. And it's just it makes you realize, if you say say on a desk is a pile of objects. It doesn't. But if you say on his desk is a cornucopia of things, it just changes. It goes, oh, that's what writing, especially in television scripts and spec stuff, like you're writing for the reader, not to be what's on the screen.
Okay.
how difficult is writing dialogue?
Again, I know people who agonize, and they agonize over things, and it takes them days. I have a friend who on shows, and he brought me up one show we did in Canada with actually Jimmy Marsden. Exactly, he was 18. We tried to get him drunk, and on his 18th birthday, he wouldn't go with us. James Marsden, but some people have trouble, and they agonize over every word. And I've seen them, and my feeling is I can't. So that's way too hard. Again, it's that party trick. Matter of fact, my partner recently just said to me, we're writing something, and I always come up with a line and say, oh, here's the line, I'll say it. And he goes, oh, that's great, what is it? And then when I try and tell him again, I'm fixing it. And he finally said to me, he said, I don't know how you do it, but stop rewriting. Even though everyone's supposed to be writing, he goes, when you say it the first time, it's perfect, and then you screw it up. So again, when you say how hard is it, again, it goes that thing. If it was difficult, I wouldn't be doing it, because I'm a basically lazy person. It's just, I look at it as taking dictation. I have the scene, I have everything else, and when I'm writing, it's almost there's a comedy pilot that I have that is going out there, and people like it. Matter of fact, during my 5 months of walking, I became friends. One of my walking buddies was Bob Odenkirk, who actually liked this. But there's just a scene where I didn't like the scene as I'm writing it, because this is boring. And halfway through it, all of a sudden a line popped up, and I go, oh, now I see where it's going. And it made me laugh as I was typing it. So
I see, for me, writing about fantasy sports is just basically reiterating the stats, looking for trends, and trying to compare matchups, and then just trying to predict what's going to happen in the future. To me, writing dialogue and making it tie together and still maintain a humor, that seems to me like it would be impossible. And
yeah,
I'm so honored, and I respect you so much for being able to do that.
well, I would appreciate it if it was deserved. But yeah, it's just a matter, because in your voices, when you hear the voices, you know what the characters are, you know what they would say, and they all have you're writing. Everyone has a different voice, different sentence, and you just in your mind you know who they are, so you hear them and you kind of like them, and okay, or don't like them.
Hey, well, Glenn, forgive me if you guys already talked about this, but I just want to know, who are some of your go-to people, / role models whenever you were younger, growing up, reading stuff, reading different articles? Who were some people that you would go to that influenced you?
Monty Python.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Love it.
Yeah, I mean, so with Python and just so many those kind of things. One of the coolest thing, and it's the greatest comedy show ever written, was the Dick Van Dyke Show, written by Carl
Yeah.
Reiner.
Yeah.
Mary Tyler
And
Moore.
right, and when I got the interview for the Mickey Mouse Club, they said send my credits. My only credit was the show I just come off of. So I basically said, I'm not running for president. I can write whatever I want. So I made up this whole sheet of credits. And with someone who used to write a newspaper column, he would quote me. And I said I wrote for the newspapers that I had. And just anything that I could get away with. I wrote for a lot of comedians, so I put them in. And I looked at it and said, I need one more thing. And I wrote at the bottom, staff writer, Alan Brady Show, which was the show on the Dick Van Dyke, thinking that either they won't know what it is, which is fine. They'll get the joke, which is fine. Or they'll think, oh, this is not right. He's cheating, in which case you don't want to work for them. I sent it in. I get a call back, come into the Disney building, I'm meeting with the head writer, and he says, before you start, just so you know, unless you screw up this interview, you have the job based on just your resume. And I said, oh, really? Anything particular? And he reached down and he pulled out a picture the staff the season before had made of the writing staff, all wearing yellow shirts that said the Alan Brady Show on it. So he knew I fit in. I was nominated for a Writers Guild Award that year, and they had these banquets and dinners, and Carl Reiner was being honored. So I saw Carl, and I went up to Carl, got in line with everybody going up to Carl. And I went up and said, first of all, thank you for my career. It's because of you. And he said, no. And I said, I also want to thank you for a job. And he goes, what job did I give you? And I told him the story. And he laughed, which is actually the best story I've ever had. I made Carl Reiner laugh. And then he said to me, you keep that on your credits. And then if anybody ever asks, I'll say, yes, you were a staff writer on the show.
Well, wait, you said
Carl Reiner, all those great, Buck Henry, Mel Brooks, all that's,
yeah.
The movies of the 70s, comedies from the 70s are some of the best comedies.
Do you like Larry David at all? I mean, I just started your enthusiasm. I find it to be so hilarious. I've never watched it. I don't know why. Sometimes I don't watch sitcoms. I get so wrapped up in other things. But I was like, let's just start the episode. I ended up watching 3, and it's just like, it's like his comedy. It does the full circle thing, a scene in the beginning will tie into the scene at the end. And what are your thoughts on him, on our Curb Your Enthusiasm?
It's him. I mean, I met him. It's, I used to when I was doing stand-up and then writing, I used to hang out at the Improv in LA around.
Oh, wow.
We that's because you're networking. We'd go there 6 nights a week and hang out from like 8 o'clock to closing at 2. And my tables included people like that, and actually Milton Berle and Rodney Dangerfield and the Smothers Brothers. So it's like I knew all these. They were all not exactly my peers, but those were all my friends and people that I knew. So I know him, and I love his shows. I don't watch, weirdly enough, a lot of comedies.
Yeah,
because I find them annoying, because it's like, that's not the joke. This is better. And it's like, why is this on the air? There's a couple shows that I watch where I think it's brilliant, and not because I can't do that. I don't see that. But for the most part, I avoid comedies.
I can understand.
You're a comedian yourself. You've done stand-up, you've written it. So I have to ask you, how do you feel when a producer puts in a laugh track on something you wrote?
Oh,
do you feel
horrible.
It's necessary or not?
No, it's not necessary. It's. I mean, there's less and less of that now, but it's just because then they never do it correctly. The absolute worst experience is when you're on a show and you're writing the specs for each week. You're writing this, and you come in on a Tuesday, and it's what they call a table reading, where the actors are at the table reading their parts, and all the studio execs are there. And as a writer, your job is to laugh outrageously badly at every single joke, because if they don't hear, the execs don't hear the laugh, the studio people, they don't think it's funny. So you're not listening to what you're supposed to be listening is how does it play. You're more involved in trying to get these people to think it's funny, and then we'll fix it later. And as you get closer and closer to the actual filming, like the day before, they come in, it's an empty set, an empty room. The actors and everyone have now done this show 5 or 6 times. We're laying it out for the camera, and they come and they sit. And because the cameraman, the lighting guy, did not laugh loudly for this joke that he's now heard for the 17th time, they come back with notes. That's not working.
Hey, Glenn. So now, I mean, this is awesome because one of my passions is comedy. I love stand up. I absolutely love it. So who are some? I guess who is your favorite comic that you've worked with or comedian that you've worked with, and then who is an underrated comedian that a lot of people may not give the flowers to that they should?
Oh God, it's hard again because my comedy days were the 80s and 90s. So those are, and it's hard because they're friends. I mean, there's when I was sitting there was only one comic who, when he would perform, that we would leave our table and go in to watch him perform. That I would, and he's been in movies and stuff like that, but you'd never know him from comedy. I like Seinfeld, is always great. Geez, putting on the way, I hadn't really thought about that. It's like I said, it's weird. I like right now. I like Kevin Maroney. I love Maroney. He's great. Again, it's weird. I don't watch a lot of comedy because it's kind of like if you're if you're a construction worker asking, hey, you want to go out to this construction site and watch them work?
Okay.
See,
be hypercritical.
Oh, Mel Brooks is.
Mel Brooks would
right.
always make me laugh. Jerry Seinfeld, I just don't get it. I just don't get Jerry's comedy. I'm a old school Jerry Lewis type, slapstick, fall down. That makes me laugh.
Yeah,
and it will forever.
We had debate going back when I was in high school. It was the debate, Stooges or Marx Brothers. And that's right there. You know who he was. I was a Marx Brothers fan. And Mel Brooks, by the way, wrote the funniest comedy ever. So,
what are you, Spaceball?
The producers. Because it's not only funny, but it's perfect. It does everything you need to do, and it's absolutely perfect. So,
wow. Well, for me, it's Paul Mooney. I mean, I just.
Oh, yes.
Paul Mooney I don't think he gets enough credit. I don't think that, I mean, God rest his soul, but dude was just hilarious. He spanned decades of just writing for different people, and it was amazing. So, yeah.
Well, it's funny you should do that because I actually work with him. I used to hang out with him. At the Laugh Factory.
Richard Pryor or Eddie Murphy? Glenn, Richard Pryor or Eddie Murphy?
Pryor.
Yeah.
Pryor. Eddie, and again, it's one of these things because they start having different feelings. Eddie Murphy, who is funny, but when I was at Paramount before, I was in writing. So I was in publicity. I had to deal with them and stuff like that. And I was the person who was sent over to deliver stuff to Eddie's office. It was two offices. Simpson Bruckheim and Eddie was above it, and none of my female workers would go over there. It's because his Uncle Ray was there, and it was just the drugs and Mike Tyson sitting on a case, and it's like it was so uncomfortable to go there. So
wow.
Now it's stuff like that, but it's kind of like, okay, I have those images. He almost I made a horrible mistake once. I was walking on, and I turned around. There's a golf cart about 4 feet behind me, about to run me over, and I jumped out of the way. And as it passed by, it was Eddie driving Mike Tyson, and I said that was a horrible mistake on my part. I should have let him hit me.
You should have let him
crawl over to the executive's office and say, "Hi, we're partners now."
I love it.
That's hilarious.
There was a comedy troupe. I want to say in the 80s or 90s. It was not a spinoff, but it was similar to Saturday Night Live. Do you remember what I'm thinking about?
The Canadian one?
Mad
Pardon
TV.
me? No, not Mad TV. No.
Canadian, it's from Canadian with Rick Moranis and
Yeah,
why am I blanking out? That the best show.
yeah.
And Levy, who's on Schitt's Creek, he was on it, and his wife.
Yeah.
And
Oh wow.
why am I blanking? Was it SCTV? What was it called? It was a Canadian. All those guys came out of that.
I love the scene on Vacation where Levy is the used car or the car salesman, and he's like, I know what must have happened. They must have took your car to the back, and they took Griswold's car to the back and smashed it. And then he had that. Yeah, that was classic. Yep.
Hey, they're coming back out with Ghostbusters. There's a new Ghostbusters.
Yeah, the rehash thing. Where's the creativity? I mean,
Yeah,
we need more creative writing.
Yeah.
You're talking about people who are brilliant. Steve Martin. And
yeah.
favorite
Jerk.
planes, trains, and automobiles.
Oh,
Steve Martin sings too. I mean, this guy's
yeah.
just multi
And plays the
talented.
banjo.
He's very talented.
It's interesting. As a stand-up, when I first saw Steve Martin, I liked him, and then I disliked him because he was playing. Because of what happened, he became arenas, and everybody wanted to go and hear him do the same thing, so they could talk. So that I wasn't a big fan of The Jerk because it's the same ongoing thing. And then I saw Roxanne, which he wrote, and not only was it brilliant, but there's a scene where he's fencing on top of a wall, and I looked and it goes, "Oh my God, the man is a dancer." It was a ballet, and from that point on, he can do no wrong. He's just brilliant in so many different ways.
I need to get one more question in because we're getting close to the end.
Oh,
my favorite modern comic is Gabriel Iglesias, Fluffy. Have you seen him?
I've seen him a couple, but not enough to really comment on him.
Okay. So what do you want to promote about yourself? Where can people find your work?
Let's see. I have, okay. Now I say this, now I'm going to have to go back and go to work and start putting new things on. I have a website called Off the Mainstream that occasionally when I have things I want to write, I put on, and I've just been so between the strike last summer and now trying to get things going. I haven't been on there, but it has one of my favorite things, and it has two things on it that outside of the article is one, there's a picture category, pictures of places I've been, and all my pictures are of something blocked by the back of a head.
Off the mainstream.com.
Off the mainstream.com. And the other thing is
you're pitching a new show too, right?
Well, I'm trying to get it out there now. So
can you give us a working title?
It's called Bars and Grill, and it's about the celebrity chef who gets sent to prison and turns the prison dining hall into the #1 dining destination.
That sounds like a win.
And the log line is it's Shawshank Redemption meets Gordon Ramsay in Hell's Kitchen.
Wow. Okay.
I love it. I love it. Better be good with salt and pepper.
Much. We haven't talked in 20 years.
Yeah.
And just thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show.
I'm sorry it's over. It's like you have. I love doing it. This is actually going. What am I going to talk about? And the fact that I was like making all my sports notes to try and look like I knew what I was doing. But this is great. And any other time,
during the off season, I'm focusing on the people who built the industry. And you're one of the guys that built the industry. That whole Fox Sports team built the industry back in 2000. So you're perfect for this show, and you're always welcome. If you ever want to promote something, you're always welcome to come on.
Great. And if you ever, at the last moment you need somebody, I'm here. I'm available. It's great meeting you.
Thanks, JC.
Great meeting you and Tip and JC, wherever you are in the back. And Greg, I'm glad you reached out. This has been great.
It's been a pleasure. I wish I could find Mike. I haven't talked to Mike in a long time.
He's on Facebook. He's out in I know he's back in Southern California.
Well, I'll look for him then. And it's time for JC to take us out because I've got to drive 30 minutes to get to my hotel.
Okay. All right. Good night.